listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Well, Diamond is on mute at the moment, so hopefully this will
get Sorry about that. Welcome to the show, folks. This is another edition of Cosmic Catastrophe on Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. We've been talking about, well, Cosmic Catastrophe in the form mostly over the last 10 weeks or so of the Younger Dryas event. Today, we're going to get a little bit more speculative, perhaps, but what we're going to try to do is wrap our heads around some pretty compelling information worldwide that suggests that whatever was going on in antiquity was known by all of the inhabitants of Earth. Now, they didn't have cell phones. We didn't have the Pony Express. So something is going on because these uncanny similarities that we're about to show you in the next hour and discuss, well, they're mind-boggling. And you know what we're about to show, some of it. You don't know what I'm about to present. But we have been talking, on the last show, we were talking about how Gobekli Tepe was potentially being used as a astronomical observatory. Now, we also know that there's only a few percent of all of those hills in Anatolia have been excavated. And that means that there are thousands of astronomical observatories that are carved in bas-relief in spectacular fashion, supposedly around 12,000 years ago.
Which is astounding.
Yeah,
if you think about how many hills that are there, potentially you have a map for the galaxy, perhaps? I mean, that's extraordinary. I mean, that remains to be seen, right? If all of those hills with all of their carvings can be really matched up to the sky, that's gonna be an enormous amount of work. So it remains to be seen, but still.
Well, and I was looking at some aerial maps of Gobekli Tepe where they show several of the stone enclosures in plan view, and they extrapolated with LiDAR. You can see the stone, the T-pillars, the main T-pillars in the center. They are slowly changing from circle to circle. It is as if over
like their orientation. That's what you mean?
Yeah, subtly changing, like a clock is ticking. And they're like, this one's bad. We got to do another one. When they could have just tweaked the pillars in the same enclosure, there was a reason why they wanted to save that. And I think they buried it and then they made the next one because whatever they were doing in that encyclopedia of knowledge no longer mattered. And they needed a whole new encyclopedia for the time that they were doing it.
Or, I mean, perhaps each one of those circles with their center T-pillar, marks some particular cometary or meteor stream, or perhaps each one shows a different era in history.
Yeah, and that we're going to get into that with the Moai on Easter Island. They suggest that each of the Moai were built by subsequent kings. Each king built a single Moai and put it up, and then the next king or in another area was like, oh, I'm going to build a better Moai. And so the Moai were built through generationally. Each generation, you come up, you see all these Moai. What are these? Well, we're going to build one this year or whatever. So that is one of the ideas on the Moai. The problem with the Moai, and we're about to dive into that in the first half here, is that the stories, they don't match up. So I've looked at lots of scientific literature. I've looked at lots of archaeological, anthropological, and historical accounts, and the accounts don't match up. And I'm looking all within the last 10 years. I'm not going way back, just the most recent stuff. So just to give you a background, let's share a screen here and make us tiny. So there is Pillar 43 and the Andrew Collins work where he suggests that this pillar is depicting a time on Earth 12,900 years ago. And that's how the night sky would have looked. And so
I'm not seeing what you're looking at.
Oh, okay.
I don't know if we're having a screen share issue or.
Interesting. Let me go back. Oh, it's because I'm not start sharing. There we go.
There we go.
Can you see it now?
Yep.
Okay, cool. So that was the Andrew Collins picture, and where he suggests that Pillar 43 is representing the night sky 9600 BC.
Right. As also suggested by Sweatman and Sitritkis.
Okay, so that's actually 11.6. That would be the end of the Younger Dryas.
Well, that Sweatman at least dates this particular pillar to 10. What is it? It's like 10.9 BC. So it's like the 12.9 event, basically.
Oh, so it's either the beginning event or the end event, whatever. These people are depicting a catastrophic event on Earth.
Right.
And you and I, for the last decade, we've known each other. I can even remember talking about Moai with you maybe 10 years ago in Philly.
Yeah.
We were speculating that this is also from pre-Diluvian, meaning before the Younger Dryas event. But there's a lot of evidence to suggest that the people on this island were making these statues 1,000 years ago, which is not unheard of. Because we're going to get into that in the second half about stealing culture or cultural appropriation. You move into an area that has megalithic things and you start replicating it.
And claim the original megalithic things as your own, perhaps.
Right. And then the ones you make are crappier versions and people are like, what's going on here? How did you get dumber? All of these cultures got dumber when they reoccupied the site because they did not know how to do it. And that goes here on Easter Island. Take a look at some of these Moai had. I know if you're on the radio, you can't look at them, but you can Google some. These are some of the largest Moai on the island, and they're buried up to their necks. One of these Moai, and you can see a guy on a horse next to one of the heads. That head has got to be 20 foot high, just the head. These Moai average 69 feet long and weigh over 120 tons. This is some of the largest rocks on Earth that we can even move. And so saying that people 1,000 years ago that were carving the light, tough Moai, they were carving Moai. So let me give you some of the stats here. There are, in fact, 887 known Moai. So out of the 887 known, 834 are light and made of soft, easily carved tuff. You and I have been to locations with tuff like Sankawi, where the rock, you can literally take another rock and just scrape it and go an inch in 5 seconds.
Yeah, I mean, you can scratch it with your fingernail, basically.
Exactly. So that's what 834 out of 887 Moai are made of, tough. And those, in my opinion, are probably the ones that were made on Rapa Nui by the Rapa Nuans 1,000 years ago on Easter Island, because they were duplicating these 69-foot buried megalithic statues because they were completely enamored. I mean, these must have been like deities. If you don't know where these things come from and your whole country has a bunch of gigantic, creepy statues, what are you going to do?
Right.
Yeah, so it seems like they're replicating it. Now, here's the weird thing.
And the composition of the large Moai are basalt, correct?
Which is why they're not weathering. Tuff weathers easily.
Yeah.
I mean, look at the faces on these 69-foot Moai.
The features are very sharp.
Just carved, right? Yeah. And these statues may, in fact, be 12,000 plus years old, in my opinion. Now, so we have there's 834 made of the soft tuff out of 887. That leaves 53 Moai. 40 of them are carved by an unknown rock that I couldn't determine. And there are 13 that are carved with basalt, one of the hardest rocks on Earth. Now, the weird thing is that the people on Easter Island, the hardest thing that they ever had, the hardest tool, is called a basalt hammer. And I can assure you, you cannot carve a basalt Moai with a piece of basalt. It just doesn't work. It's the same hardness, therefore it will do nothing.
Yeah.
So there is no archaeological evidence that the people of Rapa Nui, Easter Island, had tools to carve the basalt. So therein is the one thing. The next thing is the images on the back of the Moai. Those are not original. And in fact, in 2013, researchers at the University of Southampton used digital imaging to examine greater detail the carvings of the back of the Hoa Hakanai Easter Island statue. This is one that was stolen from Easter Island 100 years ago by the British Museum, and we're looking at it here. And the people of Easter Island, they want this baby back.
Yeah.
They actually stole two of them. They have Hoa Hava, this one, and the really nice carved one with the nice nipples. This is Hoa Hakanani, or Lost or Stolen Friend, which the British Museum, in fact, stole it. Now, this is one of the basalt moais. A couple things you can see here are some scratches on the chest. See them?
Yeah.
They're fresh. And they're
Yeah.
fresh, meaning probably 100 years old when they were dragging this thing off the top of the mountain, putting it on a ship and bringing it back to England. That's when they damaged it.
Yeah.
But you can see the rest of the statue has a beautiful smoothing-like texture and a patina that's built up on this basalt. You can even see some really fine necklines, like there was jewelry on the neck that is worn down. In order to get this amount of wear on a piece of basalt, it would take thousands of years.
You know, I just noticed something in the caption of this, which also says that it's missing paint, coral eye sockets, and stone eyes. I was not aware that that was part of the Moai.
Yeah, so you can see some of the red paint here. It looks like there's maybe a scarf that was showing. The paint, in fact, was still on the Moai when they stole it 100 years ago. And in the moving process, you can even see some red on the face here. Do you see those colors?
I don't see the colors at all, no.
Okay, well, yeah, it'll show up on the replay.
Yeah.
The people on Easter Island were celebrating these Moai, and in fact would paint them, right? If you can't carve them, you can paint them. They're still here. So that's one of the things they did. They painted them, and when they had ceremonies, you see these dark sockets that are empty. They would put a piece of fire coral in it, and then they would actually put another piece of stone in the fire coral to make a pupil, and then these creepy things were very ominous, staring at you. Yeah, so I can read some of the history of that in general. And this is the archaeological account of how the Easter Islanders carved these Moai. Not the one you're looking at, because it's made of basalt. It says, using basalt stone picks, the Easter Island Moai were carved from solidified volcanic ash of the Rono-Raku volcano. They're all monolithic, and the carvings in one piece average 20 tons. That's the small ones. And the small ones measure 20 feet tall. Some statues, the ones we looked at, are 69 feet tall, and I misjudged. They're actually 270 tons. That's
holy cow.
That's insane.
And we're still claiming that the Rapa Nui moved these with ropes.
The small ones they did. They've moved.
Sure,
them.
the small ones. Sure.
No, the big ones
But
are
not
buried up
these.
to their necks in the middle of a field.
Yeah, well, that too.
So the problem is the archaeologists really haven't addressed that. They have, and I told you the ridiculous papers that are out. They say that those were freestanding 1,000 years ago and that a series of landslides have buried them.
And they all happen to land upright. Buried.
Where the landslide from this hill coming from? Are you kidding me?
Right.
There is solid rock above this little slope of dirt. And some of them are way in front here in the transition. See how it's flat out here in the front? This guy's in the flat, so he's not even in the slope. The whole idea that this is 1,000 years worth of landslides is kind of ridiculous, because Easter Island is in a very sweet spot in the Pacific where they don't get tropical storms, they don't get hurricanes, and it doesn't rain that often. That's why there's no trees. It's just some grass. So it's not a very fertile, wet, it's not a rainforest. And so the whole idea of it sometime in the past having different weather, that definitely wasn't the case in the last 10 or 11,000 years, because we've been in the interglacial for that time and the weather's been pretty similar here. So that kind of, and you have to do all these landslides in 1,000 years to bury these guys 80 feet deep.
Right.
Well, actually, these are, if this is a 69 footer and 19 foot is sticking out, 50 feet is buried here.
Yeah.
50 feet. Do you know that's a 5-story building, 6-story building? That's a lot of landslides. So that whole story is kind of ridiculous. Do you agree?
Yeah, especially with that slope in the background that's pretty minimal and all rock at the moment.
All right,
anyway.
so the Easter Islanders are using their basalt picks to carve these things. And some of them are 69 feet tall and weigh 270 tons. So we can exclude those from being carved by Easter Islanders because they're made of basalt. And they wouldn't have been able to carve them with basalt. It's impossible.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. Now, many of the Moai on Easter Island had red stone crowns placed upon their heads that people are unaware of. And when you place these on their heads, they look remarkably like a T-pillar. I want to see if I can find, there it is.
Yeah.
And some people 3 years ago were claiming that they were the first to uncover this on the internets. The only problem is Graham Hancock wrote about it 8 years ago in his book, Magicians of the Gods. Yeah. So if anyone gets kudos on that, it's Graham Hancock. And his whole thing in the book was these fingers and this belt buckle.
Yeah.
How in the world do the Eastern Islanders of Rapa Nui know exactly what's on a carving 12,000 years ago in Anatolia?
Or vice versa.
Right. Which came first, the chicken or the egg?
Sure.
Did an Easter Islander happen to go on vacation in Turkey?
Yeah.
4,600 miles away?
I mean, it's not like, okay, let's say on the Moai, the hand position is not necessarily so unusual or anything. However, it seems really important to the statue, and obviously it's very important for the Gobekli Tepe column.
Yes.
You know, because you have this rectangular column with these hands and arms coming around the center, like clearly very anthropomorphic, very purposeful. And then also you have this belt for both of them. So there's got to be something really significant there.
Right. And in the belt buckle in Gobekli Tepe, you have the H blocks.
Mm-hmm.
And they're not all vertical. This one's sideways.
Yeah.
These two are vertical, forming I's, and these are H's.
Yeah, you see that all over Gobekli Tepe. You see I's and H's, and they flip.
Right, and the same thing
as well as some crescents.
And we see the same thing at Puma Punku.
Yeah.
And we'll get into the handbags. Let's don't even get started on handbags.
Yeah.
But this Twitter user claimed to be the first to discover Gobekli Tepe and Easter Island Moai motifs matched exactly. So this is 3 years ago that someone came up with the idea that perhaps, where is it? That this pillar 43, and one of the very few backed carved Moais, there's only a few that are carved, depict the exact same motif. And what's even weirder is the butt cheek has now been completely worn off, but back in this picture, you could see a guy chopping a head off. And over at Gobekli Tepe, it's just a headless guy. Yeah. So that is very startling.
Yeah, and I keep wondering, I mean, the carvings are a little bit different, but there are so many similarities, not just that butt cheek and the headless guy, but look at the shape of the, I don't know what to call it, the figure below the belt on the Moai.
Yeah, the scorpion and the figure are the same. And then there's
you've got a very similar thing going on there. Then you've got the birds in the upper portion, which, if Sweatman is correct, those birds are signifying astrological constellations, and the circle is denoting the position of the sun in the sky to indicate when it is.
Interesting. Now here's the, go ahead.
You've got that, and then you've got that circle appearing again in a slightly different position on the back of the Moai. And there's another back carving too that has two circles there, so I don't really know what to make of that.
Yeah, well, there's a circle they interpret here under the bird on the right.
Oh, yeah.
And then the main circle on the bottom.
Right.
Now, what's interesting is that they did do digital imaging. So let's go over that.
Right,
And
because you
then
said
if-
these are not original, these bat carvings.
the only original carving to the Moai is the belt, the circle, and this figure. That was the original carving. And then there are 3 subsequent layers of graffiti.
Oh, I have an idea, but go ahead.
Okay, so let me tell you what the archaeologists say that this all represents. That these birds, and this here is an egg, this has to do with the bird cult of Rapa Nui. And for 1,000 years, their religious ceremony, the only real thing that they've held on to historically, is this tradition of trying to kill themselves. So all the young hunters and warriors go up on Orongo at the ceremonial village here on the top and the edge of the volcano. Now, Orongo is really interesting because of a number of reasons. Let me see if I can pull some of these up. Damn, I don't have a picture. I think I could find it in here, but these huts on the top here, there we go. They're dolems.
Mm-hmm.
They're made of stone. They're very thick. The roofs are even stone. These are the same dolems you'd find in Ireland and all around the world, which people think were made because societies were being bombarded by lightning or impactors.
Mm-hmm.
And after everyone died, they're like, wait a minute, we got to stop making our houses out of animal skins. We need some caves or something.
Yeah.
So some people went into caves, other people that didn't have caves readily available, but stone made stone dolems. Look how small the doors are. You had to crawl in.
Yeah.
Why would you do that? It's not cold on Easter Island.
Right. Like that makes me think that this is guarding against radiation. Otherwise, why would your doorway be so small? Because that doorway, you can easily just put another rock in front of it and it's closed.
Yeah, from the inside.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that's interesting. I didn't consider that. But this was completely obliterated. And they think that this is where the 2 tiny basalt moai originally stood.
The
Up
2
here,
tiny ones? What are the 2 tiny moai?
the ones that were stolen and brought to the British Museum.
Yeah.
They're so unique compared to the rest. And there is a platform up here that doesn't have a moai on it because there are certain special platforms. You can see on the top right, all the moai are on a platform. It's called an ahu. And it's pretty easy to identify an ahu even without a moai on it. And there's an ahu up here and there's no moai. So it's probably where the British Museum stole it from. And the reason those scratches are on it is because it's on the top of this volcano. Imagine how hard it was in 1900 to get that thing down.
Yeah.
They probably just drug it down the hill.
Yeah.
Like on a wood sled. And a couple of times it might have fallen off. They put it back on.
Right.
So anyway, the ceremonial village of Orongo is one of the most interesting and spectacular archaeological sites on Easter Island. They don't really tell you why, but based on what we just talked about and the fact that there's dolems up here is pretty weird. And they put them on the top, the very highest point on the island.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting as well.
So the seas must be deadly to them as well. They need
That's
to
what
be
I was thinking.
far from the ocean. And now that they're in the exposed area, they need to be protected.
Yeah.
Yep. So let's go on with the bird cult myth before we get into interpreting all these carvings. It's a celebration of religious origin in honor of the creator god, which reaches its climax during the Tangata Manu competition. Those who take part in the ceremony live during a time in houses that were specially built for this purpose. That's what they claim, that these houses were built because in the morning they're about to jump in the ocean, swim over to an island, and go look for an egg. So they needed stone houses for that to be done.
Like, what is the connection there, really?
Well, actually, they go on to saying they believe the first Orongo constructions were not related to the Manatura cult. In fact, just before the start of the village on the edge that looks at the lagoon, so they think that this was here before they even started the bird cult. That's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So they allude to a bunch of things that are happening before people are on Easter Island at all, because they only say that the Easter Islanders got there around 1,200 years ago.
Right. But of course, they just gloss over the things that happened before because they really don't know.
So if there are stone dolems on Easter Island before the Eastern Islanders got there, you can damn well rest assured that there are Moai there too.
Yeah.
Now, here's the more baffling thing. The only basalt quarry in Easter Island is under 100 feet of water.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a great way to end the first half. So we'll be right back with more mind-blowing information. Stay tuned.
Listen to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. And we'll be right back after this message.
Who owns you? If you're not in control, then someone else is. Join me, Ivy West, for Voices on the Wind, Saturday. I discuss government, health, metaphysics, suppressed science, universal mysteries, little-known incredible facts, alternative energies, and even more than you can imagine. Won't you join us on Revolution Radio Saturdays for Voices on the Wind with me, Ivy West.
There are lives in the balance, people under fire, children at the cannons.
Because if your head's in the sand, your tail is a target.
Thank you for listening to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, the #1 listener-supported radio station on the internet. Please help support this station so this battle can continue forward. Revolution Radio!
There have been imaginative science fiction writers for generations.
Be evasive.
But that doesn't mean that they're telling the truth as opposed to fiction.
I'm aware of some archaeologists that have uncovered large bones indicating giants in Virginia. Genesis chapter 6, verse 4, there were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of God came unto the daughters of men, indicating that there were giants before the Nephilim.
And sons of God, plural. They weren't talking about Jesus coming down and
No, that's right. Yeah. Uh-huh.
I'm Steve Crawford. Join me every Thursday night in Studio A at 6 p.m. Eastern for Factor Theory Live. Find us on www.revolution.radio. Great guests and great stories. What do you believe?
Join me on the Brian Rouge Show on Revolution Radio, Eastern Standard Time, every Tuesday night from 6 to 8. We talk about the four most vital things, in my view, affecting all of humanity. Number one is UFOs and aliens and their agenda for the advancement of humanity. Number two is the Jewish establishment's control over all aspects of human civilization. Number three, the truth about Adolf Hitler, how he was the opposite of what we've been told. Number four is advanced ancient global civilizations. Join me on the Brian Rouge Show, Tuesday nights from 6 to 8 on Studio B on Revolution Radio.
Thank you for listening to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. Any commercial advertising you may hear in this program is of the sole discretion and benefit of the host of whose program you are listening to. Revolution Radio does not endorse any commercial products, nor does it accept monetary compensation for on-air advertising of commercial products, nor will it ever. We are and shall remain 100% listener supported. Any product advertising on this program are considered used at higher risk, and Revolution Radio shall not be held liable for any claims or damages received from any product advertised within this program. Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps. The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and FreedomSlips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, FreedomSlips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Yes, and we're back with the second half. This has been pretty exciting and interesting so far. And unfortunately, we are not going to have time to cover all the stuff I've got up here. So
what else is new?
Can you still see the screen share?
Yes, I see the screen share, but at the moment it's us. There we go. Yeah.
Okay. So there are two moai with the same back carvings. I'm looking at this one here, and there doesn't really appear to be a delineation from the lower carvings and the upper carvings.
You don't think? The lower half, is that what you're saying?
In this picture, you can see that this looks kind of crappy, not a very good job, and that this bas relief is much more pronounced.
Yeah.
But in that last shot, I really couldn't see it. I mean, look at the toes.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the other one doesn't have that kind of detail.
I mean, and again, this is basalt, right? So it's not like an erosion issue necessarily.
Right. And how are they carving it?
Right.
That's a good question. Now here, let me go over the bird cult theory. The back of the statue is covered in intricate ceremonial imagery connected with the Birdman cult. Isn't it weird? Like when they found Gobekli Tepe, they said, oh, it's just a skull cult.
I know.
That's because they found evidence of brain surgery.
Yeah.
It shows advanced technology, not a skull cult.
Yeah.
Total insanity there.
Well, it's just such a lame explanation. It's like we found all these things. We have no idea what it means. So we're just going to make up this silly thing about what we think it is. It just screams like we don't know what we're talking about. Yeah. Just say you don't know. Stop making stuff up and just say you don't know.
Well, they do know about the bird cult religion. It sprung up around 1400 when the Easter Island was about to collapse. There's no more food on the island. There's no more wood because the people were making all these moai for hundreds of years. They realized how stupid they are, and they just destroyed their whole island. So this weird bird cult religion springs up in 1400. Now, most of the moai were thought to be carved around 1000 AD. So 400 years passes, and then this bird cult springs up. And then during the bird cult religion, the people were so angered by the fact that they destroyed their biome that they started toppling the moai. They became angry at what they had done. And by 1774, when Captain James Cook discovered the island, he didn't discover it. There were already people there. I hate when they say that. When he came upon the island that was inhabited, can you imagine going to an island? There's no more trees. There's thousands of toppled statues. You're like, what the heck happened here?
Right. You know, it almost suggests that it's kind of the opposite of what's being suggested. It's as if the inhabitants of Easter Island looked at these moai with the back carvings with all of the birds on them, and that started a bird cult, which they later became angry at because whatever they were doing did not achieve what they were trying to achieve. Like as if they're angry at their gods.
Yeah, interesting. Now, these moai are not unique to Easter Island. Did you know that?
No, I did not know that at all.
Yes, let me bring up that data. Okay, some of these have been found fairly recently. Oh, so they're still finding moai on Easter Island.
Okay.
And the style is virtually identical to those found in the Pitcairn Islands and other Polynesian islands, including Tahiti.
Wow.
And they claim that over time, the statues became larger and the heads more in proportion to the torso. And by the final phase, they had become very tall and slender figures. And this is probably where the totem pole comes from in the Pacific Northwest and then all Native American cultures. These are some of the first totem poles. And that originates, and we can even trace this back. If you're looking at the back of this, This can be related to the cartouches in Egypt.
Mm-hmm.
You know what a cartouche is? Where in a small oval disc, it tells a story using 3 or 4 hieroglyphs.
Mm-hmm.
All right, and they also say that these symbols here on the right ear are vaginas.
Really?
Yeah. So these are 3 or 4 vaginas.
That seems like a big stretch to me.
Yeah, I know. And that this upper part here, see that? That was a larger carving that got removed when they added the bird cult over top. I'm like, no, it isn't. This looks exactly like Gobekli Tepe's T-pillar and the top of it. Let's go find that.
Yeah.
This stuff right here. See that stuff right in there?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's exactly what this is. Right above the birds. Right above the birds, you get this stuff. Not vaginas. But whatever this represents, they also have it here on Easter Island in the same depiction.
Yeah.
Kind of interesting.
Yeah. Very interesting.
Yeah, and what does it all mean? Well, the bird motif is not exclusive to Easter Island and to Gobekli Tepe. The Akkadians, right? The Anunnaki are depicted as these bird people holding pine cones. And the other tools in their sash here, like what are these things? And so we've got the bird motif all over, and we've got the handbags. And look at this guy there's a bird above this guy in the South American motif, holding a handbag with a bird above him, looking very much like this Anunnaki shot here, right?
Yeah.
From Mesopotamia.
Yeah.
And then we've got the birds and the handbags in all 3 civilizations, supposedly separated by thousands of years and thousands of miles.
Now, the South American carving, I don't know what the handbag would signify, but in Sweatman and Sitricus interpret the handbags not as handbags, but as, let's say, sunset, because the figures next to the handles would indicate like an animal, a zodiac symbol. So the 3 of them together would show the position of the sun in zodiac at the solstices and equinoxes, right? So it helps give context for a particular year. But the handbag on the Assyrian carving, I forget the name, but some people say that those are supposedly like buckets that you would use to carry water. However, they appear everywhere. So why are they so significant? Like, I have a hard time with that concept because they're obviously significant and important. And then you put these 3 things together and it's like, okay, maybe they mean something completely different.
Yeah, because what's interesting here is that
they keep showing up.
In the South American shot here, the guy has a bird head on as a mask. And there's a bird above him and he's got a bird head mask. But in the Assyrian motif, the head is the bird. But they're trying to say the same thing, whatever it is they're saying. Were there bird people on Earth?
I mean, I will admit that I'm rather partial to the Sweatman explanation of the birds on the Gobekli Tepe stone as indicating specific astrological constellations.
Well, yeah, because they're very unique birds. They're not like the same bird.
Right, and they do match pretty well. And that vulture stone there, that middle pillar 43 there, does match up pretty well to one of the Moai back carvings. Not the first one we were looking at, but the second one I think that you pulled up. The birds are very similar themselves. Yeah, this one.
Yeah, because see how they're different birds. Well, they claim that these 2 are male and female frigate birds. This is the Moai, the archaeological interpretation for Easter Island. These are frigate birds. It's all part of the Birdman cult. Well, what's this bird?
Right.
Not a frigate bird?
Well, to me, that looks a lot like the bird all the way to the right upper left. I'm sorry, all the way to the upper right on the vulture stone. Yeah, which is supposed to be Ophiuchus. And that the position on the Moai is perhaps even a little bit better to match up with the stars.
Yes. Yes.
You
And
know, and
there's
certainly
three
the bird
birds.
on the left you could say is the vulture. You
Yeah,
know,
there's 3
and
birds
then you've got
on pillar.
Go
There's
ahead.
3 birds on pillar 43 and a circle
Uh-huh.
in the wing of the bird, and there's 3 birds, and the proportionality is similar.
Uh-huh.
Biggest bird on the left.
Yep. Which would be Sagittarius, and then you've got Scorpio on the bottom.
Interesting.
Yeah. And it's below that line, right? Like where the belt would be again. So it's very interesting.
And then the snake here on pillar 43 to the right of the 3rd bird would represent a comet.
Well, according to Sweatman, that snake would be part of the Ophiuchus constellation, the serpent bearer.
Well, that's kind of the snake and the serpent bearer. That's where we get Satan from. And it all comes from the comet. Satan is the comet. It's kind of interesting how Cosmic Catastrophe may have written all of our religious text for us.
Yeah, sure.
And here we're seeing some of the first depictions of that. Now, the bird motif, in case you didn't know, is all over Easter Island. Did you know that?
Nope.
At the top of that mountain in Orongo, the cliffs are all carved with these birds.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about these carvings. They're pretty interesting. It's weird too that a lot of the birds are like facing downwards.
Yeah, all of them. All of them. All of them on that picture. There's paintings in caves. Most of them were stolen. You see here, this is a piece that's been broken off. This is stolen and it's in a museum. These museums went to Easter Island and literally brought jackhammers and stole all of the art in the caves. It's so unethical. It's insane.
Well, Western archaeology has done this for decades. It's terrible. Like, oh, this is cool. We're just going to take it.
And now you and I walk into the desert on BLM land and pick up an arrowhead. It's a federal offense and we go to jail for 10 years.
Right. You can't even pick up a leaf and take that home.
But they were just going into caves on Easter Island with jackhammers and cutting out cave art. Absolutely insane.
Right.
Here's another painted slab from the top of that mountain there, the Orongo. And just more carvings of birds, like on every outcrop. So now this is the location of the Birdman cult. And simply, if you went up here and saw all these carvings and looked over at that island and you knew that there were birds that nested on that island, you would think that there's a relationship and maybe you develop a whole religion. And certainly that's what they did. Like when the frigate birds came to the island, all the young warriors came up here and did a ceremony. Then they jumped into the waters and swam across to the island and waited for the first egg. And the first person to grab the first egg, put it in this wicker basket, swim across the strait back to the island, come back, climb back up to the top of the mountain. He was declared Birdman. And he had to do nothing for the next year. He was literally relieved of all of his chores. Sounds like a pretty awesome vacation. Everyone else gets to do stuff, but you're Birdman and you just walk around and be awesome. That was the whole religion. And I would suggest that it's more likely that these carvings were there when the Easter Islanders got to the island and they developed their religion around the carvings.
Right. That's what I'm thinking. That's sort of what I was suggesting earlier. And I want to throw out something else, too, that I kind of think you don't have pictures of at the moment. But Brian Forster recently showed a bunch of photos of megalithic walls on Easter Island, which I was not aware of, and they look a lot like the walls that you would find at Sacsayhuaman. He's got them up on his YouTube channel.
The Ahu. These are the platforms. Take a look at this.
Oh, they're part of the platforms. Okay.
No, just look at this. This is a vestige of some giant structure that was here.
Okay, not part of the platforms.
No, look at that.
Yeah. So, like, I mean, clearly, also, this doesn't match up with the dolums, right? Like, the dolums are probably much more recent because they're kind of like a, not very refined structure, and they're not made out of huge pieces of stone like this.
No, those were knocked down time and time again. I looked at a paper. They've been rebuilt like 50 times. So no one has any information on those.
Yeah.
They were rebuilt by the bird cult that's swimming across the ocean for their ceremony, obviously.
Right.
They found them up there and they said, yeah, let's rebuild them.
So everything screams of like imitation, right? You've got these megalithic walls that don't resemble anything that the Easter Island people that we know of built. You've got the giant basalt moai, and then you've got the tiny ones that the Easter Islanders that we know of made, and then you've got this bird cult thing where you've got all these birds carved into the stone and people doing this bird cult thing, but the reason for it is not clear. It's interesting.
There are now many Egyptologists, independent researchers, that say that whenever they go to Egypt, they can spot the graffiti. That all of these giant megalithic structures were stolen by the Egyptians thousands of years ago simply by carving their names into it. And based on like the amount of certain statues that were perfectly made out of the hardest rock ever, that were completely shined and smoothed to a flat sheen that we can't even do today, they then would carve these crappy hieroglyphs on them, which you can easily spot as being of a much lesser technology.
Yeah.
Similar to going to Peru, where you can see the megalithic walls and then the crappy construction of the Inca right on top.
Yes. And I just want to point out, too, that this picture of this wall, since it's not necessarily evident, this is probably like 12 feet tall. I just looked at another photo of a wall like this, and a human being's head only comes up to the top of the first course.
Yeah, so this is clear evidence that whoever lived on Easter Island pre-Diluvian, 12,000 plus years ago, could move 270-ton blocks. The current archaeological explanation for why the Moai are sitting here is that they carved them nearby, and this is as far as they could move them. So they just left them. And only the 20-footers made it to the platforms.
So they got them from the quarry that's 100 feet below sea level.
Brought them up here.
Got them up here, and then they were like, okay, we quit now. It's like, come on, that doesn't make any sense at all.
And they left them all standing vertically.
Yes, that too.
That's literally the story. They gave up and they left them there. Yeah, these ones are too big. So they did it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7 times. They kept doing it, and they're like, all right.
Yeah, that's enough.
But I think that this is the game changer, the megalithic wall on Easter Island that no one talks about.
Yeah.
Because it's clearly the same as what's going on at Sacsayhuaman.
Yes.
And many other South American places.
Yeah, and I bet anything too that this is very similar in the sense that you probably can't even slip like a piece of paper in the seams. It's so tight.
Exactly.
Which is crazy. Yeah.
Right. And so if this is as old as the basalt Moai, you can see there's very little in the way of weathering on basalt. There's not much going on here.
Lots of lichen, but
yeah, I mean, because it's 12,000 years old, you would expect some lichen.
Yeah.
So very interesting stuff going on worldwide.
Yeah. Isn't that so interesting too, that like this thing that happens where people's culture gets built upon a mystery from the past that those people don't know anything about? Neither do we. It's fascinating how that happens.
They're like passing on information that they don't know why.
And they don't even know what it is. Yeah.
And it all begins.
The Egyptians did it. These people did it.
It all begins 40,000 years ago when they start going into caves. And this has recently been, guess what they recently matched this up with? A constellation. The eyes of the bull here, or whatever this is, this eye and the eye of the human match up perfectly with the summer triangle, Altimira, which would have been visible back then. And you can even see how they kind of made this more look triangular.
Yeah, yeah.
The whole motif looks triangular.
Yeah.
And it's completely bizarre. It makes no sense, like the bird with the long stick and the sideways floating human.
The angle of the human making that triangle, like why would you draw your human at that angle?
Because that's your constellation.
Right.
And
Fascinating.
so this cave, this is really bizarre because this is how you had to get in here. It's a 60-foot shaft from vertically down to get to this wall.
Wow.
So how did someone 40,000 years ago get down a 60-foot shaft? Because they had to put makeshift ladders in here in 1951 to view this. See the ladder? Like a rope ladder?
Yeah.
Definitely had to put a rope ladder in there.
Yep.
Why aren't they excavating the bottoms of these caves?
Right.
That's what I want to know.
Yeah. I still want to know what the belt and the arms around the Moai and the Gobekli Tepe columns are. Like, what is that? I keep thinking it's the plane of the ecliptic,
Take a
as
look at
above,
this.
so below kind of thing, but...
Take a look at this. Even in Peru.
Yeah.
And he's got the same hat as
Which
the
looks so
Moai.
much like a totem pole.
And he's got a red hat, the same as the Moai.
Yeah.
These people are boating. I mean, it's literally a 2,000 mile more, 3,000 miles of sea between the two.
Yeah.
Same hats.
Yeah.
Totally insane.
Yeah.
And then the depiction of the toes here look exactly like the toes on the birds. I don't know if it's really weird. The way that they're depicting these long, thin fingers. They're almost like alien fingers.
They're kind of like my fingers, actually.
Let me get that other shot. Yeah, look at the fingers here on the Moai.
Oh, I never really quite noticed that. That's interesting. Huh. Yeah, what is that? Because it keeps showing up everywhere.
Indeed, it does. So clearly what we're seeing, because they date these to they date this to 1200 AD. They date this to 1,000 years ago, and then they date this to 12,000 years ago. Something is wrong with the date. Yeah, clearly. Now, what's weird is the Moai have nipples. There's not nipples on almost any other type of statue.
Well, I mean, clearly you're using an anthropomorphic figure to symbolize something. So I kind of think that the nipples don't matter that much. Like you're anthropomorphizing a rectangular column,
So at Gobekli Tepe, there's lots of stuff going on that people don't even know about. Look at this. They have no idea what this is. Looks like some kind of an oven.
Yeah. Fireplace.
With bas relief all around it. And then even little steps in the enclosure. Look at these ducks they carved out of the bedrock that's on the ground.
That's so cool.
So these would be like here around the base of the T-pillar. Yeah.
Yeah.
So this culture, just didn't invent this 11,500 years ago. Whatever this is.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
I was looking at another column in a picture somewhere, and I don't have it on hand, but it was showing all of these foxes that turn into snakes, which I thought was pretty interesting because the center column of, I think it's enclosure D, where pillar 43 appears, the center column has a fox on it that would sort of seem to indicate where the comet came from. And so it's almost like later you find another pillar showing, all these foxes that turn into snakes. It's like as if one is depicting the comet and one is depicting the meteor stream that happens later. It's so interesting.
Yeah, the amount of information on these T-pillars, it's going to take humanity quite some time to decipher what is going on.
Yeah.
11,500 years ago.
And you can get so much more information into a picture than you can in text, So there's really a lot of depth here.
And what they're saying, remember I showed you this painting from Lascaux?
Yeah.
That it directly connects to pillar 43. The Lascaux shaft scene, this one down that shaft, shows several similarities with Pillar 43 and is likely another memorial to an encounter with the Taurid meteor stream, this time around 15,200 BC.
What are the similarities that they're referring to? I don't get it.
Well, we'll have to get to that in the next episode, won't
I guess so.
So next episode, we will talk about the similarities in the Lascaux paintings, Pillar 43, and the fact that this ancient culture was warning us about the Taurid meteor stream. That's boom.
Listen to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.